Hello, this is Video Reporting Progress and Monitoring and Adjusting, Part 3, Post-Activity Reflection. Reflection point 1 that I want to address is the rationale for inclusion of participants. The participants involved in my collaborative observation videos were Brashay Meacham, who's a science teacher, Ms. Kiara Taylor, ELAR teacher, former assistant principal, Destiny Rainey, ELAR and Art of Thinking, first year teacher, who is in a preparation program and also in her master's program. I included them in this activity because I did want diverse cross curriculum reporting. I also wanted a view from multiple lenses. Varying experiences of teachers, I felt would impact the activity in a greater way and give a greater understanding of both student and teacher needs. My point 2 of reflection was describing the activities that I initiated or improved. And those activities were both for teacher and for students. One thing that was extremely impactful was true teacher roundtable collaboration. We had not had this so far this year, a true roundtable discussion about student learning, the gaps that students were having, not cross-curricular. We met as individual contents, but even in that it was not as deeply in depth with understanding the needs of the students and even working together to create activities and instruction for students to meet those gaps that we knew that we would see and that would impact our EOY and the student achievement. There were more opportunities to interact with student data. That's key because data drives instruction. And with first year teachers and even novice teachers, even though Ms. Meacham, this is her second year, she is still considered a novice teacher. And to have opportunities to look at student data and then have that affect and drive instruction was very important. It also highlighted best practices. Not only for first year and novice teachers, but for the veteran teachers, myself, as well as Ms. Taylor. We got a chance to really look at best practices, what was going to work best for our students, looking at the data, adding some scaffolds in, actually bouncing ideas on each other for the different scaffolds that we felt would work best, especially for our emergent bilinguals and then our SPED students, those students who were really struggling. Even though we had some students who may have met the mark of 70%, that is just barely meeting. So we wanted to make sure that even those students who are those bubble students were getting what they needed. Another activity that I initiated, and I do believe that was improved, were the scaffolds that were on our slide decks. Not just what the district created, but to push teachers forward to do a little bit more, to add their own creativity to their slide decks, embedding those success criteria that students would have as a model. So teachers were modeling what was expected, and we were also aggressively monitoring, going around the room, making sure that all students were achieving the expectation. Mandatory annotations for keywords. Most students it was left up to them whether they were going to annotate or not. But with this activity, There was no negotiation. All students had to participate and do the annotations for the keywords. They had to show their work, and it did show up in student achievement. In my reflection point 3, the instructional and student achievement issue targeted by my activities were identifying keywords. The improvements that I noticed were making connections in questions and pairing with answer choices. A lot of times students would not identify those keywords. They may identify them in the question, but you would not see it in the answer options. And we made that mandatory. So we did see an increase not only in the annotation skill, but actually identifying the correct keywords. For our emerging bilinguals, this increased their vocabulary capacity, that academic vocabulary. So that was a big takeaway, was how our EBs and our SPED students were able to build vocabulary capacity just by identifying those keywords. Also, another achievement that we saw was SCRs. SCRs were scored higher. Prior to this activity, a vast majority of my students who were not in my GT classes were getting zeros for their SCRs. They were not achieving a 1 because they did not include the keywords from the prompt into their writing. It was not explicit, and they were receiving a 0. So they were not successful. After this activity, we noticed that more students who were including their keywords either on their annotations of their DOLs, or even if they created their own word banks to use to answer the questions, more students were getting their SCRs correct because they had all of the criteria listed in their SCRs that met the expectation of the prompt. Also, this addressed the campus initiative because the campus realized, and information was actually given to our campus leaders, that the SCRs are about 40%, having about 40% weight on their district test that is getting ready to come up, also on their EOY and on their STAR test. So with that heavier weight, the district and our school, our campus, wanted to make the SCRs a target. And with the work that we've done so far, the keywords, identifying those keywords, that met the expectation of our campus initiative. In addition to the student learning that was achieved, I did notice that making the connections with text improved. Better able to answer the prompt. EBs and SPED students were better able to recognize patterns in the text. My final reflection point, which was me reflecting and looking at the impact that my activities had and will have on instruction and student achievement, is greater student achievement in all academic areas. An additional establishment of an aligned focus for improvement. That was with the focus group, our teachers that met together. We all had an aligned focus, and that was throughout our cohort in 8th grade. There were more opportunities to interact with the student data. Not only with us, but students interacted with their data. They tracked how well they did on their DOLs, as well as how well they did on their SCRs. And those students were looking for those improved scores, actually seeking out their teachers for feedback. So that was an added plus. The time is now, I feel, because students cannot wait. So instruction has to be tight. We have to be able to come together as a unit, as a group, and look at these gaps in student learning, focus on those gaps, create plans to meet the needs of the students, as well as support teachers who also have gaps in their practice, in those best practices, with our campus being over 90% new teachers to the staff, and about 80 to 85 of those those teachers are first year teachers, or they are in a alternative certification program. So this impact, I believe, will be lifelong, for my students, as well as the teachers that took part in this. And we will continue this work in the future. Thank you. This is the conclusion of video number 3, reporting progress, monitoring, and adjusting. Thank you.